Guess who's coming in with a new song? Our AI musicians have come up with a new one for Todd Myers.
Here comes Todd Myers. He exposes the Olympia liar.
Ooh, good.
He uses facts and data to set bad policies on fire. Here comes Todd Myers.
Wow, sounds like an Andrew Lloyd Webber thing. Look at that, Todd Myers. Horrible lighting on you. Welcome to the show. All right, let's start first
I appreciate the bad lighting, actually. It's better for me.
Okay. Where are you? In some weird ballroom somewhere? Where are you? Or that's not your house.
This is my apartment.
All right, rich guy. Speaking of other rich guys, I guess you know Thomas Malthus, who went to the grave a fool back in 1801, never retracted his ridiculous predictions the way the world was going to end. It looks like Bill Gates has somehow seen the light. What happened to Bill Gates?
Well, you know, Bill has actually, to his credit, spent a lot of money of his own trying to find ways to reduce CO2 emissions and reduce the risk of climate change. And I think up to this point, he's sort of bought into the standard narrative, which is that climate change was, existential crisis or very close to an existential crisis. I mean, Jay Inslee used to call it an existential crisis, and that we needed to throw lots of resources at it. In his recent letter, he has toned that down a little bit, and there's two parts to it. The first part is that he says, well, it's actually not going to kill us all. It's a problem. It'll impact people, especially in developing countries where they're less, temperature increases will have a bigger impact because they don't have the resources. And so that's what he says is that, we ought to focus, instead of just focusing on temperature increases, we ought to focus on human well-being. So he sort of toned down the rhetoric on how serious climate change is. But the part that I really loved was where he said, focus on results, that there are trade-offs. We don't have unlimited amounts of money and resources. And so you have to put resources where they make the biggest bang for the buck. Mm-hmm. And this has been my mantra for the last, 15 years in Washington State, that if we want to address climate change, we got to spend every dollar wisely. And unfortunately, we tend to spend money in Washington State on things that feel good and sound good, but don't work very well. So I was really happy with that part of it in particular.
Yeah. The folks that are deeply invested in the religion of climate change, they are not so happy with him. But I'm sure he'll be able to suffer those fools. Let's just, by the good news, because I wrote you, I think yesterday or today, and I asked, hey, did you finally ever hear from the department or the education folks there with our superintendent? Because you wanted to get the real numbers on how kids are doing if they're able to read in 4th and 8th grade. You asked for those numbers, and they stopped giving them and printing them, and then you kept, haranguing them, and then finally what happens?
So we, on their webpage, they used to have an update that said, are we close to meeting our 2027, 2029 goals for reading and math and other things like that. And so I noticed that the most recent data were from 2018, 2019. So I asked them about it, and they said, well, we'll get back to you on it. And then a couple of weeks later, I noticed that they'd actually removed all of the numbers from the webpage, so you couldn't get them anymore. So then I said, well, when are you going to put these back up? So they said, we're working on it. Well, actually, yesterday morning, they did. They put up a report that has the data. Now, it's not perfect because it doesn't show you where we are in meeting those targets. It's some interesting data. It's some useful data. So it's a step in the right direction, but they still have a ways to go. So we're sort of plowing through it to figure out what it means. But no matter how you cut it, we are nowhere close to the goal of having 90% of students proficient in math and reading. And the only question is how far we are away from that. And so Mississippi has made incredible strides over the last decade. They went from 49th in the nation for math scores and reading scores to top 10 in both of those categories over the last decade. And it wasn't because they spent a lot more money. It was because they changed how they did education. So it can be done. We can get there. We can improve, but not just by throwing money at it. And we're trying to figure out how far away we are.
Well, speaking of throwing money, Chris Rakedahl, is he on the phone yet? Has he ever called us back? He's not going to come on the show. He's asked for $10 million to be able to help kids with math.
Yes. So in advance of the next legislative session, they have to send in their budget requests and for the supplemental budget. And he asked for $10 million because our students are not living up to math. And what I think is interesting is that we have been pointing out that we are falling behind. And he has done a number of videos saying, oh, don't listen to the naysayers like us. But in there, what's the great thing about government documents like this is that they tell the truth to each other. Things they won't say in public. When they don't think the public is watching, they will tell each other. And so in their own document, it actually says, well, we're about average now in the nation and we're falling, which is what we've been saying. And he wants $10 million more to solve it. Well, look, maybe that will help, but unless we change some things more fundamentally, we've thrown a lot of money at it. We've increased per student spending by 40% above inflation over the last decade. And our numbers have gone down. So I don't know what another $10 million is going to do if you just keep plowing more money into the same system. So, but I did appreciate the fact that at least in their own documents, they admit that our math scores are going down and that we're average. We shouldn't be average. We should be top 10. We were top 10 a decade ago. We're not anymore.
Well, I think we spend $20,000 per student. I just looked it up. Mississippi. Now the cost of living is a lot lower there. They spend $14,000 per student. They seem to have better results. So money does not equal better results. The Washington Policy Center and you have been looking at the money that is being asked for and the money that is not being given. I like this one. They want $10 million for EV chargers, solar powered.
Yeah. So there's a variety of EV chargers they want. But I mean, like I think we have 4 different state programs that fund EV chargers. I am not making that up.
Yeah.
I mean, that we do it. We just keep throwing money at EV chargers. And so earlier this week, actually, the state had this little program where they're creating a new program called Zevergreen. So ZEV, which is zero emission vehicle, Zevergreen for the Zevergreen state. And they talked about more electric vehicle chargers. And I said, okay, but EVs have more range. They don't need to charge as often because the batteries are better. Why are we building so many EV chargers? And they said, well, we're looking at that. So here's another $10 million for EV chargers. They just keep throwing money at it without really knowing what the goal is, what the target is, what makes sense for the future. And
they also want to spend $3.2 million on local climate plans. They want local communities to have their climate plans ready to go.
Yeah, so that's it. And so they're also requesting an additional $3 million. Now, they've already funded $22 million in the existing budget for local climate plans, and they want $3 million more. And the thing that's frustrating about this is that these climate plans, by city, like cities like Bellevue or Seattle or Spokane, they literally do nothing to reduce CO2 emissions. We have a state program that reduces CO2 emissions, and this doesn't change that state program or those goals. It just writes a plan about how you're going to do it locally. It doesn't add to environmental protection. So it is really just wasted money on more shelf art and bureaucracy, money that could actually be going to help the planet or, God forbid, back into people's pockets. There are lots of other things that we should be spending actually money on in the budget that are underfunded. More planning is not one of them.
Yeah, well, when they're robbing us at the gas pump with the CCA, I guess they have to find some place to put all that money. So let's just give it to local communities to come up with their plans. I like the fact that in this piece that you put up at Washington Policy Center, Todd, you run through the money that they're going to spend and the money that they've refused to spend. I thought this one was most shocking. The Department of Corrections has asked for $6.5 million to be able to track down criminals that have outstanding warrants. $6.5 million. And what did the Brain Trust in Olympia say about that?
Well, this is a request. So the Department of Corrections has turned in this request. We'll see if the governor includes that in his budget, and we'll see if the legislature next year adopts it. But as far as I'm concerned, right, why are they having to ask for $6.5 million in a supplemental budget? That should have already been funded. You know, we just talked about how they've spent $22 million on local government planning. Like, here, take $6.5 million of that from the main budget and put it into finding criminals. Now, in the actual document that Department of Corrections submitted to the governor to try to encourage him to include this in his supplemental budget, it says that people with outstanding warrants are the most likely to offend. We know these people are out there. They should be behind bars. They should be arrested, but Department of Corrections doesn't have the money to go get them. And that is even more telling than sort of the silly programs that we spend money on. What is telling is that there are some good things that we should be spending money on. Basic government services like public safety that don't get funded, while, you know, funding for EV chargers and government planning and things like that, that does get funded.
Yeah,
That's
but you have to realize it's disproportionate because they end up arresting more men than women. So it is sort of sexist in its system. My favorite punching bag, we had Claudia Balducci on, and she was telling me how much people enjoy riding trains. And she was justifying the billions and billions of dollars being spent on Sound Transit. So Sound Transit's rail light initiative doesn't make the grade, according to the Seattle Times. I'm sure you had a response to seeing how much money and what's happening with that waste.
Well, what's remarkable about Sound Transit is that for 30 years they have said, now we have a handle on the costs of light rail, and there are constant increases. And now, of course, Sound Transit says that they need another $30 billion over and above what they had budgeted. We were just talking about $6 million to find criminals with outstanding warrants. Sound Transit needs $30 billion.
I know some of those criminals are.
That's right.
Sound Transit Board.
So the question is, what are we getting for our money? And the other issue is that even if Sound Transit meets its targets, its passenger targets, it still is less than 5% of passengers in the region. People still will be driving their cars and other things like that. So we're spending billions and billions, tens of billions of dollars on something that carries very few people, does very little to reduce congestion, but the costs keep going up and up and up.
Well, Todd, you not only study numbers, but you're a pretty good study of human nature. Why do the people continue every time they put these things before them? Yeah, let's spend more money on Sound Transit, or let's put trains here in West Seattle. Let's have one go to Ballard. Let's build this bridge over the I-90. Why do people vote on the thing? Because every time they propose one of these things, they're always over budget and then never meeting the deadline on them. But why do people say yes to it?
I think it's a hard question. One thing does come to mind. There's a wonderful TV program from Britain in the early 80s called Yes Minister.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite lines is when one of the bureaucrats is arguing for some silly program, and he says, something must be done. This is something, therefore we must do it. I think people, want to reduce congestion. They want to improve, transportation, and they don't know how to do it. So when, experts from Sound Transit say, here's the solution, people don't feel empowered to say no. And I think that they don't have a sense of what it's going to cost them. And of course, what ends up happening is Sound Transit, has an incentive to lowball the cost. Oh, this doesn't cost very much. This will cost this. We've got the handle on, we're the experts. We got the handle on the cost. There are going to be no more cost overruns. Trust us. And they sort of dare the public to tell them no. And I think in this region, people up until this point have said, well, we do need to do something. So we'll give this a shot. And of course, it keeps biting us in the butt. Hopefully people will wake up, but here we are.
Yeah. Plus now they do the sunk cost. Well, we've come this far. We've put this much into it. So let's just keep going. Well, as PJ O'Rourke used to say, everybody's in favor of public transportation. They want you on the bus. They're not getting on the bus, but they want you on the bus. Get out of your car, get in the bus so I can get to work faster.
Well, and now what we're seeing is that they want to have, some people are proposing free transit. Well, okay, so you just mentioned, where the criminals are. Imagine where people are if there's free transit. Is that going to make, the commuters want to get on the bus? Because now there's no barrier to people getting on. A problem they already have with, people riding who make other people uncomfortable. They have to deal with that. That's part of dealing with public transit. So, it's not going well.
Well, listen, that's there. That should have made our headline. I thought, because the way people do get on buses, I thought it was already free.
Functionally, it may be. It's not supposed to be. But
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll let you get back to that palatial estate you have with your wooden doors behind you and a gigantic lamp. Todd, here comes your exit song.
Here comes Todd Myers.
Yes.
He exposes the Olympian liars. He uses facts and data to set bad policies on fire.
Thank you, Todd Myers.
Here comes Todd Myers.
There we go.
Coming soon to Broadway.
That's all right. Thank you, Todd. There he goes out the door. Wow, that is a Andrew Lloyd Webber tape right there, huh?